Well, buckle up your seatbelts, ladies and gentlemen, because you are in for an inspirational ride. This episode features my interview with the author of 5 best-selling children's books. She also produced an inspirational journal. She collaborated on a couple of music albums, and she published a romance novel. I'm talking about Sheri Fink, someone who I've been following on Instagram for a while, and I actually didn't know what to expect when I reached out to Sheri and asked to interview her. I had a feeling it was going to be an interesting story, and man, oh man, this is a great one. We chatted for so long. In fact, I'm breaking this up into 2 different episodes, so this is part 1. I know you're going to love it, so stay tuned. I'm Bob Baker, and this is the Creative Entrepreneur Podcast, Season 3, Episode 3. Well, lucky me. Look who I've got on Skype with me right now. It's Sheri Fink. Hi, Sheri.
Hi. Happy to be here.
I am happy that you are here. So, yeah, like we were talking before I hit the record button, you and I have been sort of connected on Facebook and Instagram, and I've just been really intrigued following your activities. There's always a lively photo, and I'm going to have to ask you about your propensity to, I'm assuming that those are wigs that you're wearing with the colored hair, or you don't actually color
Maybe.
it. Oh, maybe. Because I see different tones at different times, but yeah, there's this certain vibrancy to what you do, and you do a variety of things in the creative world, which is makes you a perfect guest for the creative entrepreneur. And so instead of me like reading some official bio, here's the way I always like to start. So Sheri, imagine, so if you're at a party and you meet somebody and they don't know who you are and they ask that common question, so Sheri, what do you do? I'm just curious how would you answer that question in a situation like that?
I typically say I'm a writer. And if they're curious enough to find out what kind of writer, I say I write books that help kids with their self-esteem.
Oh, wow. That's pretty basic. Yeah.
Yeah, I keep it very simple.
Very cool. So, like on your website, it says The Whimsical World of Sheri Fink, and then you got the 3 words at the top there, love, bliss, and inspiration, which all sound very positive and empowering. Maybe like a lot of interviews, I guess we'll start off with your story, because there are some references to like overcoming adversity, but I don't think there are any details. So I don't know, whatever you want to share, like about who you are and how you got to publish these books, and then we'll get into the details of what you create and how you serve and all that good stuff.
Absolutely. Well, I like to say I'm an accidental author, but I believe it was my destiny, because even as a kid, I was writing my own stories and creating my own art and doing all kinds of entrepreneurial, artistic things growing up in rural Virginia. And my family, we always had money for food on the table, but we didn't have money for things that kids really wanted, like new clothes and toys and books and, everything that you think matters when you're a little kid. So the way that I dealt with that was I created my own little world, and I was always creating. And I had a lot of fun with that. But as I grew a little bit older, I realized that the only way I'd be able to go to college, because no one in my family had ever gone, was to get a scholarship. And the only way that could happen was if I did really well in school. So I kind of put my creative endeavors aside and focused on getting good grades, and I did very well. Ultimately went to school, liked it so much, got my master's degree while I was working as well, and then had a business management program in the future. But during that time, I had decided I wanted the sexy job. I had equated success with the title and the perks and the money and being important to a company. So I climbed that corporate ladder for over 12 years. And I was in online marketing, and I learned so much through that process, and ultimately became in charge of departments and budgets and made a lot of money for other people. But during that time, especially the last 2 years I was in it, I was going through a lot of soul searching, because it wasn't as rewarding as it had once been. And I had realized, climbing that ladder, it was up against the wrong wall. And I had invested everything I had into it. I mean, it was part of my identity. And I didn't know what else I could do. And I think a lot of us face that in our lives, where we've invested so much into our career, and it's hard to walk away, right?
Right.
So during that time, I had this gift of adversity. I don't know if you ever had that, where you're going through a difficult time in your life, and then something else happens and makes it completely worse.
Wow. I love that. I had never heard that phrase. You said the gift of adversity. Huh?
Yes, the gift of adversity.
I guess that's another way of saying turning lemons into lemonade or something like that.
That's right. That's right. Something that totally sucked. Yeah.
So that was so in your case, what was that?
Well, while I was going through that soul searching, working in the corporate world, there was this woman in my office who was bullying me. And it was really bad. And I was having a very hard time with it because that's just not who I am. I'm not that type of person, and I couldn't understand it. And I did everything that people tell you to do. I tried everything, and none of those things worked. And I worked way too hard to run away from that situation. So I was driving to work one day and I was crying because I didn't want to go and I didn't know what to do. And I just had this moment of total surrender where I had no more ego about it. And I just said out loud, help me. I will do anything. And in that moment, and I don't think I've ever been that surrendered in my whole life before. I definitely wasn't meditating or anything before that. And so in that moment, this idea came to me about a rose that grows up in a weed bed and thinks that she's the weed. And then this miracle happened where the story wrote through me in the car on the way to work. And I lived in Orange County, California at the time. So I had a lot of stoplights to write the story. And I didn't know what to do. It was flowing through me. I'd never had anything happen like that before. Everything I had created before that was conscious, was me thinking it through. This was just flowing. And so I grabbed the back of an envelope and a mini golf pencil because that's what I had in the car. And I wrote it on my leg at stoplights on the way to work.
Wow.
All the way through, from the very first line to the very end. And I had never had anything like that happen before. So I wasn't telling anybody about it because I thought that's crazy,
Yeah.
But I made an important decision that day. And I decided that a year from that day, I would either be working for another company, doing something different, or working for myself. And that's the one I secretly hoped for, but was too scared to claim.
Of course. Yeah. Because it's,
So yeah, it's the scariest one.
And so I'm just curious. So a year later, I assume you chose the self-employment path?
I had tried other things, but nothing felt like the right fit. I was still in the same job, but I was exploring other possibilities, but nothing got me excited like the possibility of being an entrepreneur. So a year from that day, I had postponed. I took care of the company before me. I was like, well, let me see them through this client event. Let me speak at the company conference. Let me train a predecessor. Let me do all these things to get them set up in a good way until ultimately it was that day, a year later. And I got to work and I was like, this is the day. Am I going to keep my word?
Oh,
so I typed, I had a lot of cognitive dissonance about it. I had a good job, and that's what I had thought I had worked for all this time. So I wrote my letter. I gave it to my boss, who promptly called the president in for an emergency meeting. Everybody told me I was nuts, tried to talk me out of it, offered me all kinds of things. But I was just like, no, I'm finally gonna keep my word to myself.
Wow, that was pretty powerful. And I know from the research I did on you prior that that story that sort of came through you in such a flowing manner, I guess, ended up being a book called The Little Rose. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
But at this point, a year later, when you turned in your resignation, had you done anything with the book, or was it published yet, or how did that?
No, I had put it in a drawer, and I didn't tell anybody about it. So I had no idea what was sitting in that drawer. But I was finally open to the possibility of doing something different. I didn't know what it was. I thought I was going to be doing online marketing for smaller brands, and I started out doing that. And my clients were doing really well. They were very happy, but I wasn't.
Right.
And I started looking at that and wondering, what was wrong with me. And so I went to a conference a week after I left the corporate job. I had already booked this conference a year in advance. And while I was there, I had a random conversation with someone I'd never met before about writing. And she was like, oh, what do you write? And I said, well, I'm marketing and business stuff, really boring. You wouldn't be interested. She's like, no, you've got more. And she kept pushing me. And finally, I remembered I have this little story. And I told it to her. And she said, I just got goosebumps. You have to do something with that because my grandchildren need that message.
Wow. That's awesome.
And that's when I thought, maybe it's a children's book. And then I couldn't stop thinking about it. It was scary and juicy. And I just thought, wow, if I could help one kid believe in themselves and think that they're more than that circumstance that they're in that moment, wouldn't that be worth it? And of course, it was completely terrifying too. So
I want to just stop you for a minute here because there's a number. I've been taking notes this whole time. It's a fascinating story. Before we get to the publication of that and what that launched into, this, I just want to highlight and just a couple of things here. So one, this idea that when you were a kid, you sort of created your own world, and you, like a lot of children, you're expressing your creativity in your own way. And I think, and I've done, hundreds of these interviews over the years, and I used to publish a local music newspaper here in my hometown of St. Louis back in the late 80s through the late 90s. And then that transferred into the podcast that I'm doing, like this one now. It's not with everyone, but it is quite often that people who are self-employed tap into something that they did when they were kids, which most people move on, as you did. You went into school, you got the corporate job, and that was your identity, and you left behind those childhood creative urges. But a lot of people bring them back and realize that's an important part of who they are. I assume you experienced that too?
Yeah. It was scary though. Like it's scary to give up something that has been so consistent and steady and stable in your life, and what everybody who, everyone I grew up around, that's what they would aspire to. And when I walked away, they were like, wow, what are you doing? So I didn't have a lot of emotional support for it, but I just felt there was something more. And then when I got home from that conference, I couldn't stop thinking about it. It's like I had to do something with it. So I made a decision. I said, I'm going to publish this book in 6 months. Mm-hmm. And I had no idea what that would take or what would happen, but I just knew that I needed to move fast, because if I didn't, I was going to chicken out.
Yeah, there's a phrase that I use. Actually, I wrote a song called "Just Do It," and there's in the bridge of the song, the lyrics are "Focus on the what, focus on the why, but don't get stuck in the how."
Yeah.
And a lot of people get stuck in the, I don't know how to do this, so I better not do anything, until I know everything. But it's like that moving forward, and I think, I don't know if you're familiar with Marie Forleo, but she has a great phrase. It's everything is figure-outable.
Yeah, that's true. It is. When you have the passion for it, and I was fired up. I was like, I just need to get this done. Yeah. And so within 6 months, I figured out the basics of what I needed to know to publish a book. And within 2 weeks after it was published, it became a #1 bestseller on Amazon.
Wow.
Much to my own surprise. And then it stayed at #1 for over 60 weeks.
Wow. That's amazing. Yeah. And we probably need to peel that back a little bit too at some point here. I'm not sure how much you know about my background, but actually my 14th paperback book just recently came out. Most of my titles are self-published or independently published. Is that how you got out The Little Rose? Was it self-published?
I did.
Oh, awesome.
I independently published. Mm-hmm.
Yay, good for you. And then I served as president of the St. Louis Publishers Association here for several years, and so I encountered authors of all types. And I know that the children's, there's a lot of people that are interested in children's books and that put something out. There's a conundrum with children's books because you have dual audiences. You create it for the child, but the person who actually purchases it are the parents or the grandparents or the teachers, childcare providers, whatever. And so it's like you have to cater to one audience, even though the book is for a younger reader.
Yes.
And so for that to be #1 on Amazon is quite a feat. So congratulations.
Thank you.
So a lot of times people who will go through this traditional career path and then realize and then regain or reawaken their passion and turn it into a business, sometimes there's an inclination to think that those were wasted years. But I think everything that you do in life comes together to serve you. And so I have a feeling that you going into the corporate world and doing marketing in the corporate world served you as an entrepreneur because you were familiar. And I had a similar situation in my career path too. I've been mostly self-employed, but there was a period. My last day job, or time I ever worked for somebody else, was 13 years ago, and that was a short-lived corporate gig. But yeah, they trained me, sent me to workshops to learn about stuff that I use in my own business. And so, do you see that too? How that helped you?
Oh my gosh, tremendously. I learned everything about running a business through working for other people. I learned what not to do from the bad bosses. I learned what to do from the good bosses. I learned, how to manage a budget, how to manage people. I learned how consumer behavior evolves, and I got excited about that because marketing is never dull. You know, a lot of people don't like it because it's unpredictable, but I like that about it. Because if you had to go do the same thing every single day, I mean, that just gets so boring for a creative person.
Right.
So, and I never really looked at myself as being that creative, but in all those environments, I was always the one that came up with the creative solutions. And I'd think of things in a different way. And sometimes like people would be like, God, how do you even think like that? And I'm like, I don't know. I can't help it, you know? But now, like, it's wonderful to create a business around, you know, having creative solutions and not having limitations. And, you know, it's not always easy because I'm blazing a trail, but everything that I learned in the corporate world helped me make me who I am today. And the connections that I made during the corporate world, like I helped a ton of people when I was in corporate. Like I'm a natural connector. So if I know that you love something and I know someone who creates that, I'm going to connect you. And I didn't ask for anything in return. So then when I came out with my book and I was so nervous and I was like, oh my gosh, I have this book, you know, I don't know if anybody's interested, but it's out there. People bent over backwards to help me. And I couldn't have predicted that.
Just going to take a quick break here from the interview to offer you something for free. That's right, free. And that is the Creative Entrepreneur VIP list. When you get on it, not only will you get an update every time I post a new episode of the podcast, but I'll also give you free access to my online course called 30 Ways to Become an Empowered Artist. This course is hosted on the Udemy platform, and it features about 3.5 hours of online video training that a lot of artists have raved about. No matter what your field of creativity, you will benefit from it. Did I mention it's free? All you have to do to get all these goodies is to go to promoteyourcreativity.com. Again, that website is promoteyourcreativity.com. Go there, sign up, and get on the VIP list now. And now, back to the interview. So Sheri, even though I want to get on to some other things, I'm just curious, how did that, you know, your first book out of the gate in a very competitive market, the children's book marketplace, you know, and being a bestseller, can you just give me like a couple of bullet points of what you did to market that, or what you feel catapulted that into the bestseller charts there?
Well, when it initially happened, I didn't even understand it, right? Like my mentor had to call me and tell me like, Sheri, you were #1 best-selling author. You need to buy champagne. I was planning to do a big marketing push in July, and the book came out in March. It hit the bestseller list early April. So I wasn't really prepared for that. But then when I rolled the tape back, I started thinking like, okay, what did I do here? And the thing that I did was I was very brave. And everywhere I went, I would tell people, you know what? I want to write a best-selling children's book. Do you know anyone who's done anything like that? And people, you know, most of the time people said no, but they were very supportive. And then sometimes people said yes, like those corporate relationships that I told you about. I would ask people strategically, like, you know, some of my old bosses, like, do you know anybody who's done anything before? And sometimes they would know someone who's a best-selling author, even if it wasn't children's. And I'd say, if I give you a little blurb about me and what I'm trying to do, would you introduce me so that I may ask for a 15-minute phone call with them? And because I had helped so many people before with never asking for anything, people were like, oh yeah, of course I'll do that. So I ended up having these conversations with like 9 different best-selling authors. And I use bestseller because I think whenever I do anything, I want it to be a huge success. And I used that at the time as a measure of success because I didn't know any others. Mm-hmm. So I would have these quick conversations with people, and I would ask, my knees would be shaking. Right. And I'd be trying to sound professional, but I had no idea what I was doing. So I would ask them, what did you do that worked? What did you do that you would not do again? And knowing what I'm trying to accomplish, what would you recommend? And is there someone else you think I should talk with?
Oh, wow.
And if they said yes, then I'd say, would you introduce me if I gave you a blurb? So I make it so easy for people to help me that they don't have to think about it. You know, if they know someone, it's an instant yes, because I'm giving them a copy and paste little bio saying, you know, here's this woman who's working on her first children's book, wants to help kids with their self-esteem, that kind of thing. So I had these calls with these amazing people, and almost everybody was wonderful. There was only like, I would say 1 or 2 people that kind of patted me on the head and were like, good luck, kid. Like, you're never going to be a bestseller. Like, that's not realistic. And I don't know. I'm like, you know what? they don't know me. They have no idea what I'm capable of. Neither do I. So I never, even though I felt down for the moment, I didn't keep that thought in my mind at all. I was just like, no, I'm moving forward. So I was still grateful for their time. And I thanked every single person. I sent them a thank you note and an email. And often I would shout out about them on social media. Now, I didn't have a huge following at the time, but I was very genuine because I was excited. Like, these are people who are doing amazing things and they're taking time to talk to me.
Right.
So I would give them a shout out and tag them on social media. Well, then when the book came out, I sent out an email to each of the folks who had helped me. And I said, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. Like, my book is actually on Amazon. Like, thanks to you for your help. Even if what they shared with me wasn't super helpful, their time meant a lot. So I just sent them the link. And then unbeknownst to me, many of them shared that with their followers. And I think that is what kicked it up initially. Wow. And then after that, it was the word of mouth and lots of events. Always planting seeds. Yeah,
because I can tell, just from your photos and then looking at your website before this interview, you are not a slacker. You're pretty proactive in getting out there and speaking and posting things of what you're doing, And this is a reoccurring theme throughout the interviews, and I just love that you're reinforcing this, the importance of relationship. This is all, people get all wrapped up in the technology and the machinery of things, and it's all about people, and connections with people and caring, and it sounds like that's a big part of who you are.
Oh yes, I always say that people are the secret of my success.
Wow.
And that's so hard for people to digest because they want a formula. They want a do A, B, C recipe for success, and I'm like, no, you need to care about other people. Right. That's the key. And I couldn't have predicted that either. But it's naturally who I am, and it has happened organically because of that.
Right. Well, yeah, that's another thought that came up as you were talking about, I don't know what's going to happen with this. I think there's a kind of a lot of people buy my books or whatever. They're people that want to know it all or have all their ducks in a row. And there's all these cliches about being prepared. So they don't make any mistakes. And I guess that's kind of what you were doing when you reached out to these people to learn their best practices. But I think there's a beauty in being naive. Sometimes when you don't know the rules, you actually are a little bit more willing to experiment and try things. And so I wouldn't downplay that kind of beginner's mind. I don't know. How do you feel about that?
I agree with you because you don't know the limitations, so you don't accept them for yourself.
Right.
And that's how people are amazed when I say I'm independent. They're like, wow, you have 7 books, 5 number 1 bestsellers. They're all bestsellers, but 5 number 1s. And you're doing all these speaking engagements and you have a beauty line and you have this and that and that. And you're indie, 100% indie.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, yeah, it's totally possible.
It is.
I'm like the unicorn of the publishing world, and people meet me. Sometimes, Bob, they will cry.
Wow.
Because they've been told for so many years that there's only one way, and they keep beating their heads up against that brick wall, hoping that it changes. And meanwhile, I'm over here having fun, charting a new path that's, a little bit more adventurous and a lot more scary, but a hell of a lot more fun. And they're like, oh my gosh, I want to do that.
Right. And I guess I've been living this life and preaching this message for so long that I assume, in this day and age that most people are aware of this, the opportunities to take the independent path. But it's amazing how people still, and it's funny too, even with younger musicians who were born and grew up in the, in the era of, iPods and on MP3 downloads in the digital world. It's almost like it's embedded in their DNA that they think they need a record deal or writers need a book publishing deal. It just says, where do you get this? You didn't even grow up in an era where that was the thing, So I just don't get it. So let's, so this one book you started hinting at it there. So let's just kind of hit on some of the other things that you do. And then I want to get into my official list of questions so we can, reveal more as we go along. But so that one book led to a series of children's books on similar topics.
Yes, and they're all designed to inspire and delight kids while planting seeds of self-esteem.
That's cool.
And they all tackle different aspects. So the first book, The Little Rose, is about authenticity, which helps kids remember that they are special just the way they are. They don't have to be liked or appreciated or anything by anybody else to be wonderful just the way they are. And then the others tackle themes like adaptability, looking for the good in change, being a late bloomer, true friendship, and shyness, overcoming bashfulness in order to be able to make friends.
That's awesome. Wow. Wow. And so how many books in that line, that children's book line now?
There are 5.
5 of them. Okay. And when you say bestsellers, I know there's kind of that word is used a lot. You mean in your category or in in the children's book category?
On Amazon, number 1.
On Amazon, and that is indeed. Yeah, I've been number 1 in the music business books category, so I will. Usually, I do say it's number 1 in the music business books, but it's a bestseller, so you. You can honestly say that. And then there's a couple other things that you have, like so those are all for kids. But then you have 3 other things that I was able to discern from your website. One is a My Bliss book, which I guess is for adults in following their passion. Is that true?
Yes, it's an inspirational journal. So a couple years ago, I kept getting asked in interviews, "How are you doing this? Like, how are you doing all these things and having the most fun?" And I was like, well, I created this daily journal based on things that best practices I'd learned from other people, from mentors, from trial and error in my own life. And I had this 1-sheet journal, like 1 sheet a day. And when I would check off the things that I accomplished, I'd write my victories. I'd write, the 5 priorities for the day. I would, all these things, my serendipities, inspired actions, like all these things I would capture. And then at the end of the day, I felt like, wow, I've really lived today. And then I would go to sleep like feeling satisfied. And the next day I'd get up and do it again. And I showed them that. I was like, this is what I'm doing. And a couple friends started asking me, well, what are you doing? And I showed it them and like, I need that. I need that so I can have momentum in my own life. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm going to publish it as a pink journal because that's what I want. And, if people want it, great. And if they, whatever, I didn't do a whole big campaign around it. I was just like, I'm creating this for me. And if you like it, awesome. And people love it. It's been incredible. It's just unexpected, but I guess principles work for a reason,
Right. Yeah. It's like, I'll have what she's having. And if that's what she's using, I want it too.
Yeah. And I've been asked to create it for kids. And I'm thinking, I really think kids could get it the way that it is. I mean, they're very smart. They're much more clever than we give them credit for most of the time.
Absolutely. And then one thing I didn't realize at all was that you've also have some like music tracks out?
I do. I have 2 albums. Yeah.
Wow. So are you a singer or a songwriter or what was I didn't have a chance to listen. So what is your role in the music?
I don't consider myself to be either of those things. They came about through serendipity, just like all the other wonderful things. A few years ago, a producer from the UK approached me and said, I'm creating an inspirational album and I've got all these inspirational thought leaders who are on it. And I really want you to contribute a song. And I thought that was ridiculous because I've never done anything musical. I mean, I love music, but I've never done anything. So I said, thanks so much. I have a really full schedule, not really fit for me. And he wrote me back and he said, I know that your mission is to help people believe in themselves and achieve their dreams. And I know you do that through your books and your speaking, but this would be a whole new way for you to reach a new audience and have a bigger impact. Wow. And I believe that you belong on this album and I'll wait for you, but not forever. And I was like, who is this guy? But I couldn't stop thinking about it. And so during that time, I was like, what do I have? What do I have? And I remembered years before when I was going through a divorce, I had written this poem for myself called Remember Who You Are. And it was like basically an affirmational poem, but for whatever reason, the words really hit home for me. And I would read it like 50 times a day so that I remember that I was bigger than the circumstances that I was going through to keep myself balanced. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to dig that out. And I found it and I hadn't read it in a while. And I was like, oh my God, it's so personal. And so I was like, I'm going to send it to him and this will kill the idea. And he'll be confident that he'll pick somebody else and I'll be good. I'll keep moving along. I sent it to him. Within minutes, he wrote back, I love it. Can you record it and have it to me tomorrow?
Wow.
I know. I was like, oh my gosh.
No time like the present.
Yeah. So I didn't have time to think about it. I just moved everything off my calendar for the day. And then I'm like, how do you record something? I have no idea. So I just tested. And I liked the way that final version sounded. I sent it over to him and he mixed it with music. It's kind of like spoken word songs.
Okay.
I had never heard anything like it before, but people really love it. And they say that their kids, it helps them fall asleep at night.
Nice.
And they like it in the car because it keeps them calm. And it's very interesting. So the album came out with my track, Remember Who You Are. And then it hit number 1 in its category on Amazon, outsold like all the others. And the producer called me and said, guess what? your track outsold all the others.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, that's so amazing. And then he says, I'd like to do an EP with you. And I had never, he'd never done an EP before, and I had never done anything like that. He had to tell me what it was. And so he's like, let's do a 5-track album together, including that one track. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, I don't write music. And he's like, just write from the heart. So I did. I took a week. I wrote all the rest of the songs, sent them over to him. He loved it. He produced it. We went back and forth on the sound of things. And then the album came out, and it hit #1 in its category. It outranked Deepak Chopra and everybody else in this. It was incredible. And then he came back and said, let's do a dance version.
No way. You were like a creativity opportunity magnet. It sounds like these things keep coming to you because you're doing good work in the world, and you're open to opportunities. So there's one other thing that doesn't seem to be a fit, but maybe I don't know enough about it. You also have a book out that's like a romance novel called Cake in Bed. Is that?
Yes.
And maybe you can explain to him how I'm sure it ties in with the other things, but there's a conundrum that creative people like me, there's a lot of people that have a lot of different interests in the things that they're pursuing, and they have a tough time sort of melding them together in one brand identity. And so maybe you can tell me how this fits in and how you approach that.
Sure. Yeah. And I struggle with that initially too, because when I first had the idea, my goodness, that was like 4.5 years ago now. And I started writing it, and I didn't know what it was, but I knew it wasn't for kids because the vocabulary was different. The tone was different. That was before I even got into the juicy parts of it. But I knew I needed to write it. And I wrote it. And at the time, like, I started mentioning it in interviews maybe a year before it came out. And I had one interviewer say, have you ever seen a children's author successfully navigate their way outside of the children's box? And at the time I hadn't. So I just honestly said, no, I haven't, but I don't understand your question because I don't believe in your box.
Ooh, nice.
And they were a little bit adversarial when they asked me the question. And then when I said that, they like thought about it for a moment and they moved on. But I don't believe in limitation. Like, why would I limit myself to one form of creative expression just because that's what people know of me?
Right.
And if I can help a lot more people by creating something that I really want to create, why wouldn't I? And then when we were going through the editing process with that book, and I was working with my editor and going through all the rewrites, oh my goodness, so painful, I realized this is in alignment with my brand. The whole time I'm thinking I'm going to have to promote it separately. It's going to be different and weird. And then I was like, wait, no. At the heart of every single thing that I do, even when I'm on the radio, even when I'm on stage, everything, even when I'm like at the store, it's all about self-love. It's all about empowering people to love themselves more and go for what they really want. And that book is no different. It's just for a different audience. And so that was a huge aha for me. And I wasn't too concerned about the success of it commercially. I knew I needed to create it for me. I needed to prove to myself that I had the courage to do it once again, to step out on that ledge. And I did. And it's been almost a year now, and it hit the top 20 best-selling romantic comedies in Canada, which was amazing. And people write to me all the time, and men write to me. They're like, I don't usually read romance, but I like this book. They seem surprised too,
Well, that's very cool, very smart of you to see a theme. And I mean, yeah, if you had some kind of an evil, sinister, theme in the book, then I can see where it didn't tie in. But yeah, that the way you described that was beautiful. And having that mission and knowing what that is, I think is a crucial part. I think a lot of creative people, especially early maybe in their careers, are focused on the craft and the what box they fit into as far as marketing themselves, as thinking about it being an extension or an expression of their personal mission, like what's their real purpose, and how they serve through their art. And you seem to have a really good handle on that, which I think is inspiring.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the way that we've been taught to think about it traditionally has been very cerebral. It makes sense on paper. It sounds good in our heads. But when the heart wants to create, when the heart longs to do something, to have an adventure, to make a difference, you cannot always box that in on a piece of paper.
Right.
And that's something that I've had to let go of control of, because in the corporate world, I was very regimented. Like I over-delivered all the time. Like I had the goals, I exceeded the goals. And like now in my business, I've learned let go of the goal so much. Like it's not that you want to hold tight to that. You want to hold tight to the intention, the feeling that you want to create in other people and in yourself and your life. And so now I'm more focused, rather than pushing to get what I want. It's more about becoming the best magnet for what I want to attract. And that seems to be a game changer in my life. And I got to tell you, like, business isn't easy. You know, as an entrepreneur, like, especially a creative entrepreneur, like you've got to balance multiple sides of your personality and your time. And you have to like use your intuition a lot about what's a yes for you and what's not. But you feel a lot better when you don't keep yourself in a box. I don't want to be limited by other people's limitations, ever.
I love that. Words of wisdom.
I hope you enjoyed that interview with Sheri, and I hope you found it as inspirational and riveting as I did. So stay tuned for part 2, which should be coming at you next week. And I'll just remind you one more time to get that free stuff when you become a member of the Creative Entrepreneur VIP list. You get access to the 30 ways to become an empowered artist course and some other goodies and updates every time I publish a new episode. Just go to promoteyourcreativity.com. Again, that web address is promoteyourcreativity.com. Also, if you'd like to support my ongoing efforts to educate, inspire, and empower creative people around the world, I hope you'll consider becoming a patron. Just go to patreon.com/Bob Baker to learn more about that. Patreon is spelled patreon.com/Bob Baker. I would greatly appreciate your support. Thanks for all you do to express your creativity and share it with the world. I wish you the best. This is Bob Baker saying so long for now.